Hi folks, Salil this side, and we all know that today AI can do a lot. AI is way more capable than it has ever been in the past, and that uh, brought me to an idea that what can AI do in the realm of technical writing? I had this idea that can AI write documentation? So today I wanted to share with you a proof of concept of an AI technical writer. What I did was that I built a very simple, a basic Flask based notes application. It's a web application and it does very simple things. You write a note, you hit enter, it'll save it. You can also create a task. A task is a note with a status attached to it. The status can be completed or incomplete, and that distinguishes a task from a note. It does these two things. It's very simple, it's not complicated. And I thought if I can grant AI access to this web application's code and see if it can generate documentation for this web app. And well, I'll let you guys decide how the results are. We can also later down the line see what we can do with the output that AI generates for this particular web application. That was the broader idea that if AI can write documentation and if that documentation is usable or functional enough, and then what we can do if the documentation is fine, if it is decent enough, can we do something with that documentation after it has written documentation for this product? So let me bring that application up in front of you, and then we can take things from there and see how it goes. Okay. All right, folks. So this is the web app that I was talking about, right? It has two sections: tasks and notes. And in notes, you write something like book recommendation, shadow of wind, and I'll add it. So the note gets added to the list. Task complete, complete book on personal finance. I'll add it. By default, the status is incomplete. I can change it to completed, and that's how the task status changes. Now, any standard technical writer would probably look at this web app, they would try to use it, they would try to get its functionality in place, and they would have a structure in their mind immediately. Okay, fine. So I have an introduction article which talk about this app. It tries to promote some of the value that this app brings to the table, things like that. Then they would try to figure out what would be the how-to articles. So there could be two how-to articles to this. One would be a tasks article, one would be a notes article. So I did that. I did all of that. I looked at this app. I thought, what would a technical writer do? They would try to use this product and come up with documentation for this product. And I wrote all of it. Now, that documentation is available to you. If you want to review, it's available on my GitHub, on my personal GitHub. Okay, the task hive docs. So it has AI docs. I will get to the AI docs bit in AI docs folder in a bit. We'll look at Salil docs for now, and you can go to UI and you will see these articles, right? Introduction.md. It's a simple blah blah blah. For more information, see tasks. Tasks will have proper stuff, the how-to information, things about it, right? Information about the product. Similarly, notes document will have screenshots, help content related to the product. Now, this particular web app also exposes uh, an API. So it also has API documentation. So I have also created Swagger spec for this. I can also demo the API to you. So I'll just open Visual Studio Code and I'll get to Thunder client. I'll make a new request. TP 127.0.0.1/API/ let's say tasks. A get request would return the list of all tasks stored in the system. Sorry, I forgot to provide the port. It's running on 5000. Do it. We get the list of all tasks. Right? Complete book on personal. You can see that. I can also update this. So I already tried this API because of course I did. So I can go to this 8. I can change the status to false. I can send this, it will get updated. If we look at this, it's green check mark right now. I'll refresh it, it's red check mark, all that stuff. So you have, that's how a technical writer would approach, right? So they would try the product, they would try the platform, they would come up with a structure, and they would write documentation on it. And you can review that documentation that a technical writer would write for a product like this. It has API spec, everything. You can look at that. If you want to preview this, I can show a preview of this also. Let me see if I have it open here. No, I'll open it. Right. So this is your Swagger spec, right? And this is what I do. Fine. So far, so good. No, nothing complicated. Nothing that you may not already know about technical writing and documentation, because I'm assuming is majority of the people who are watching this video are technical writers who may have worked on things like these in the past. So now get to the meaty part of the story, right? Now I have this utility that I have written. I'm calling it AutoDoc AI for now. This is a work in progress. Everything is a POC, everything is a demo. I'll try to scan all the application code. I'll chunk it and I'll send it to OpenAI. And there is a prompt in place that will go along with the REST API request to OpenAI, and I have asked it to generate documentation. Now there are two parts to any application: the front end, things that you see here, and the back end, that things that you don't see, because back end is something that takes care of access to database, updating status, things like that. Okay. So I'll run the utility and let's see if it does not fall flat in my face. Okay, fine. So I'll Python CLI.py, I'll generate backend docs. Path to the app is task hive app. I'll output it to AI docs folder. I'll output all the documentation that it generates to AI docs folder. I'll run this. Right, so it'll scan, it'll look at all the Python files in the task hive app directory. It'll write documentation. The interesting bit is that it will not write Swagger specification. It will write an individual document for each API call that you can make to the platform, if it makes sense. But technical writing standards aside, we'll look at what's possible for a bit. I am of the opinion that the output it generates is functional, but you guys can comment on this. You can say that it's not functional, it's not good enough. We can discuss. But there are things that I would like you guys to see about what's possible, even if it is not a Swagger spec, even if it is a document that is written, and even if it is not standard technical writing artifact for an API that we are trying to write. Okay, so all these documents are written, and now I will try to generate documentation for the front end, the UI documentation. So I'll change this flag to front end, and my front end code lives in the static subdirectory, and let's see what it generates. So all this is also committed to GitHub, right? I just wanted to show these things to you guys so that you guys can see how this works, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. AI docs. Put this in VS Code, and we'll look at the docs that it generated. So internal is again something that is experimental. So I wanted to see if we can generate it. It's not ready yet, but let's only focus on public for now. So this is the Create Note API documentation, totally AI generated, totally AI written, right? And look at the documentation that it wrote. allows clients to create a new note by submitting content, passive voice, anthropomorphism. Sure, all those issues are there. We need to fix. We can figure out the prompt that will avoid these things. But give me a rope here a little bit. Trust me with how this goes, right? Function name, it should not come here because customers don't care about this. Customers only care about this. But yeah, request body must be in JSON format and include the following fields. But no, okay, fine. So it's fine in that sense that it can only take one field. Content, type a string. Interestingly, it also generated a sample curl request for you, right? Content type, content. This is a new note. 201 created. In Swagger Spec, we generally provide other type of response codes. For example, we provide 400. So there are 5, right? 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Normally 100 and 300 are not documented. 300 until there is a redirect. That's a stupid detail. We don't need to talk about it. But the thing is that generally we document 200, 400 and 500, right? It has not covered that bit. But that's fine. That's fine for now. We can ignore that bit. We look at something health.md. Normally we do not document health endpoints, but because it went through the entire code, it generated a document for health endpoint as well. Even this is something that I would not document, but maybe, yeah, sure, why not? Serve index. Another thing that I would generally not document because it would serve the index.html file, but yeah, yeah, whatever. I'm saying my point is that AI generated documentation is useful enough. It's not something that you would totally reject. Sure, it's not a Swagger spec, and I've tried to make OpenAI generate a Swagger spec. It did not do a good job. So I lived with this because there are things that I wanted to do. There are places that I wanted to go, and we'll discuss where I wanted to go after this bit. But from the standpoint of this POC itself, I think this is functional enough. Again, if you have a different opinion, let's discuss in the comments. We'll take a look at the UI documentation, right? Getting started task, I learn how to blah, 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 go to app, all these things, task management, note taking, getting started, add task, PNG. Yeah, it's looking for a screenshot, of course, based on the prompt. Viewing nodes, adding a new node, right? Adding a task, viewing task, edit and delete options, right? Managing your task, delete button. This is not true, but it's there anyway. You can't edit a note. You have to use the API right now. That's a limitation of the front end. We don't have that functionality over there. What do you guys think? Is it decent enough? Does it work? Again, it's there on my personal GitHub under the folder AI docs. You can see this, right? You can see all these documents available here. And let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Now that we have all these things here, now let's discuss where I wanted to go with all this. Because if I think it's functional enough, what is the end use case? And I also wanted to discuss a little bit about what will customers do with this documentation, because we have discussed a lot in the past about what a good documentation portal is, what is the right tool for a documentation portal, but with AI summarization in place and all these tools that can summarize your documentation, build a chatbot using your documentation where customers ask a question and AI summarizes the content that is relevant and provides an answer based on the question, right? I wanted to go there and I wanted to see if this content that AI generates, is it good enough for an AI summarization based chatbot? So let's get to that. Let's see that a little bit and try to understand if it works for an AI chatbot, then how relevant a documentation portal is and what's possible from this point, right? Okay. Now, I would like to go a little bit into RAG as in retrieval augmented generation. What I will do is I will take all the AI generated documentation, put that in a vector DB, and then use that as context to an AI and try to query that system and see if it can provide relevant answers. Let's see, let's do that. So I'll pull up my terminal and I'll get to the utility that I've written for all these purposes. I'll run Python. I have load docs.py. I'll provide a path of the location where I have AI generated documentation stored. So I'll just run this and all this is happening, this is working, it is trying to insert the data into the vector database and this is fine, right? Now let's try to query all the setup that we have created for this particular demo and I'll try to query this using, let's say, create a task and let's see how OpenAI responds to this particular query. Let's see. So you can see all these documents that it's using, right? So that's interesting, right? So it used all the chunks and it created an answer, UI or API, and it provided steps on how to use the user interface, and that's it. And API documentation along with a curl request. And title is interestingly enough finished doc. I think it's coming from the doc that OpenAI generated. So, but anyway, that's not the point. The point is that it has created documentation for the query that a customer could have had, right? So far so good. It looks okay. Now what I did was that I created a Slack bot. I created a Slack bot using this setup so that if you want to use Slack to query this setup, you can use that, which is what I think is going to be the next user experience for all applications going forward, where AI has the capacity to reduce the user interfaces, and we'll just try to run that, right? So I'll run this Python Slack bot dynamic actions.py dynamic actions because we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it at the end, right? So I'll run this. So the app is running. I'll get to my Slack. I've already added AutoDoc AI here. Let's see. I'll ask, how do I list all the tasks? Right? I'll ask a question and let's see what it does. So meanwhile, we'll look at, so you can see the same thing running, right? Okay, so interestingly enough, what it did was that instead of providing the documentation, it ran the task, as in it turned it into a job and ran it as a job. It hit the API and got the entire list of all the tasks in the system to you, right? So this was a tweak that I made. So that's why if you saw when I was trying to run this file, we had all these files which were not called Slackbot dynamic actions. There were other files because initially it was providing documentation, but I had this idea: what if AI can read documentation and perform the task because it already has all the information, right? It has the API call that it needs to make. So I'm using a little bit of unsafe code in there. It is trying to dynamically generate a function and using the exec command in Python to run that function, which is considered unsafe. But from the POC point of view, right, when we can build a safer way to do this, AI will read your documentation and it can run that particular job for you. But if you specifically want to read documentation, that's also possible, right? Can you provide documentation on how to create a task. I think it should understand the intent behind it and it should provide documentation. Well, let's see. Let's see what happens. How does it respond? Even at this point, I'm not 100% sure of how it will. Okay, fine. So yeah, how you can use the create task API, post, right? UI method, add task button, right? So it provided document, it could identify the intent and it could provide the documentation. A very specific counter argument to all this is that are we taking people back? Are we taking people back to the era of command line interfaces? My counter argument to that argument is that it's not exactly a CLI because with CLI you have to remember commands. Whereas here you are simply talking to the product in English, in a language that you know. You don't have to remember commands. Command line interface means that you have to design that interface. Here you don't have to design it. It totally brings down a requirement on the user that they need to work with multiple user interfaces. I think it was yesterday when I looked at a conversation where Cursor has introduced Slack integration and people could review PRs on Slack on their phones. They could suggest changes via Cursor and then they could commit those changes. So I think that's how it is going to be. You know, we'll have one user interface and we can do so many things. Now you could say that this is a simple application. Of course, it's a simple application, right? But imagine we are at a place where even the code that I'm running right now, most of it was generated using AI, right? So we are in a world where AI is writing code, AI is building software, AI is writing its documentation, AI is consuming its documentation and using the product based on user inputs, right? So we are in a world where we are consumers of businesses and as professionals, as engineers, as technical writers, as product managers, as customer support people, as sales people, our focus is on building and kind of adding to the broader AI experience, right? We still have to have the technical acumen to build these things. We still have to have the business acumen to build products that consumers will use. But I think this is where we are headed. And imagine I have written documentation. AI has written documentation. Sure, there are issues. You can do the comparison. I've provided the GitHub link. But the original point was that whatever AI is generating, is it functional enough? And I think it's yes. And this is what I worked on as a side project. I thought it will be a good idea to share with you guys. And if there is something that you would like to discuss, please let me know. We can talk. And I think this was interesting enough. Maybe it was a little too long, but hopefully it was interesting enough. Yes. Okay. I have other side projects going on. So yeah, maybe we'll catch up in the next one. Okay. Thank you so much for your attention and time. Yep.